All right, now let's say our last B'divrei Torah blessing together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher hifsanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Praise to you, Lord our God, rule of the universe, who's made us holy with your commandments and command us to busy ourselves with the words of Torah. So we start off with an illustration. This is from the Arthur, not quite sure how you pronounce that.
Schick.
Schick? Schick?
Indeed.
I thought it was Zik.
No, it's Schick,
It is Schick?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Zeke.
or at least in English, the way we say it is Schick. In his, might be different in another language, but.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You know, there's a saying in the Talmud. Rabbi Hanina says, much have I learned from my teachers, more from my colleagues, and most of all from my students. So, you know, we've been in formal class for all of 1 minute. I've already learned things from you. Thank you. So the Arthur Schick Haggadah, published in Poland in 1939, if you, presumably in time for Passover, before other things that happened in Poland in 1939, if you have a copy of A Different Night Haggadah, one of the things that is excellent about that Haggadah is it brings different illustrations of the four children from different centuries and different countries. And the Arthur Schick illustration of the four children is in that Haggadah. I was fortunate to find a copy of the Haggadah and took this picture to show how he illustrates this particular prayer, or text at least. All right, we start with a joke. What do you call somebody who derives pleasure from eating the bread of affliction? A masochist.
Laughing out loud.
You're welcome to take that to your Seder or not. All right, Abba, would you read Lachma Anya on 1 foot, please?
This is the first text in the Magid section of the Passover Seder. It talks about matzah as the bread of affliction or poverty that our ancestors ate in Egypt, perhaps because it was a quick meal for slaves to make, rather than as the bread of freedom that our ancestors ate as they left Egypt. Parentheses, perhaps this makes matzah the, quote, bread of paradox, both a food of oppression and freedom. Yet the Aramaic phrase, Lachma Anya, the bread of affliction, is a translation of the Hebrew phrase, Lechem Oni, which, in its original context from Deuteronomy chapter 16, talks about leaving Egypt, and it first mentions matzah in Egypt. The first mentions of matzah in Egypt occur in the context of getting ready to leave, chapters 12 and 13 of Exodus. So, perhaps it really is the bread of freedom. This text is composed of a memory, an action, and a hope.
Thank you. Before we go in any further, now that we know that we're talking about a text from the Seder called Lachma Anya, what questions do you have at this point?
David, just a quick question.
Yeah.
Oni would be, is it really affliction or is it poverty?
Poor man.
It's definitely poverty. It is often translated as affliction. In its context, which I'll bring the verse for you, and you can see what you can see what makes the most sense from looking at the verse itself. It is often translated as distress.
Yeah, I wondered if it was that we choose affliction in solidarity with the poor, the downtrodden, the slave, rather than that the bread itself is an affliction. Maybe that's a false dichotomy.
David,
Yes.
is it the same word as the name that Rachel gave Benjamin? Remember, she called him, I think,
Benjamin, yeah.
son
Do
of
remember
suffering.
that.
And then Yaakov changed his name
Mhm.
from what
Mhm.
she had named him. That's one. That was a comment, but I also have a question.
That's
Given how
Good recollection.
That's Ben Oni with an aleph, as opposed to Oni with an ayin.
so
And
then never mind.
Oni with an aleph can either be affliction or strength. It's one of these strange verses. So when Jacob renames him Binyamin, it may be affirming rather than undoing her original meaning.
Oh, that's interesting. But the question, I have a question for you, David, in particular, David and Neil, is when I think about it, I only know one tune for Lachma, Anya, but I'm sure there are many, many more. So what tunes are there?
All I will say is it's one of the sections which has fewer tunes than others. I believe David's going to include in the material that you all will get afterwards something that I chanted for this class, which is Lachma, Lachma Anya. But I'd have to do some real searching to find anywhere near the number of tunes for other melodies for Lachma Anya compared to other Passover texts which have many tunes.
Interestingly, in Russian, this means merciful or graceful.
What does?
Anya.
Huh.
Just look that up.
David?
Yeah.
Because this is Aramaic, it brings up the question of how much of the Haggadah is Aramaic, and what does it say about when this part of the Haggadah was created and kind of put into the mix?
Yeah. That is a question. That's two questions. Most of the Haggadah, to my knowledge, is not Aramaic. I will give you all a quick way to figure it out when you are at Seders. If you see a lot of words ending in aleph, that's a clue that you're looking at Aramaic. If you see a lot of words ending in hey, that's a clue that you're looking at Hebrew. Conveniently, aleph is like A and hey is like H, which is how I keep straight which letter goes with which language. So my recollection is that most of the Haggadah is in Hebrew and not Aramaic. I will try to do some research before I send out the source sheet tomorrow by looking through a Haggadah and seeing what I find. As to your other question about when this text was written, the short answer is around the year 600 BCE in Babylonia. The longer answer will come further into the source sheet.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
David,
Yes.
David, do other languages translate Lachma Anya as bread of affliction, or do they call it, the bread of the poor, or poor bread, because it's Lechem Oni, it's in Hebrew is bread and poor? Or is it just a choice that somebody made to translate it that way?
Well, I'm going to zip through this really quickly and then we'll come back to this.
Okay,
As in zip through the source sheet really quickly. Here we go. Okay. So I have here Spanish and French. For those of you who can understand one or the other, I apologize that the accents and tildes and whatnot are not typed in. That is my error, not the error of the original translation. But it looks like in Spanish it says, and apologizing for messing up the pronunciation, este es el pan de aflicción, so affliction, and misery, I'm assuming.
Speaking about Spanish, when my wife and I do it, we'd have some Haggadahs in English and some in Spanish.
Yes. All right, I'm going to go back to the top of the source sheet, but you'll get this at the end.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I
And
ask
it
one
is-
more question?
Please.
When I think that affliction is that's in Deuteronomy 16:16.
It's definitely in Deuteronomy 16. I'll look up that verse right now, but go on.
Okay. When I was thinking about that,
Mm-hmm.
I always wondered why it was called that, and I was thinking that God wanted the Israelites to remember the things that they was going through in Egypt, so that they could appreciate his redemption of them.
That makes perfect sense, and we'll see that verse coming up, and so you'll all be able to ponder how you feel about that comment. I will say one other thing, and then we'll move on. It is appropriate that we are asking questions about Lachma Anya because the rabbis take the phrase lechem oni, the Hebrew that becomes Lachma Anya in Aramaic, and they play with a different root from oni, that oni can be connected to, which is onim, answering. So they say it is the bread of questions. So you all are within the Talmudic tradition of posing questions about this bread. So good job. All right.
I assume it tastes the same no matter what you call it.
Yes, a matzah by any other name tastes just as dry. Unless it's a Sephardic matzah, in which case it might be different, because that's a soft matzah. Okay, how Lachma Anya said? Carol, would you read this, please?
The matzah are uncovered and raised by some. Moroccan Jews passed the matzah over each participant's head while saying this text. Some people lift up the Seder plate also at this point, as if it was being taken away. This goes back to a Talmudic custom designed to get children to ask why this night is different from other nights. The 4 questions is the very next part of the Seder. Ethiopian Jews take the shank bone and the egg and lift the Seder plate from the table as they say this text. According to a 1955 Haggadah published in Israel, the text for those in Israel is changed to, oh boy.
You can skip to the English if you'd prefer.
Thank you. I think I will, because I had my eyes dilated today and I'm still a little fuzzy. This year and next year in the land of Israel, this year and next year as free people.
Thank you.
You?
Thank you.
No.
All right, I think for the sake of time, we will keep going and then pause for questions about this in the next section later. Naomi, would you read about the tune, please?
Most common tune was composed by Yedidia Admon. He was born in Ukraine in 1894 and emigrated to Palestine in 1906, where he studied at the Teachers Seminary in Jerusalem with musicologist Avram C. Edelson, who was involved in the story of Hava Nagila. During World War I, he went to Egypt to enlist in the British Army and then moved back to the land of Israel afterwards. From 1923 to 1927, he studied music theory and composition in the US, trying to advance his career as a singer. Thereafter, he moved back to the land of Israel, where he lived until his death in 1982. Admon was a pioneer in Israeli music, inspiring future generations. His style drew from Yemenite, Persian, Arabic, and Hasidic music, plus biblical cantillation.
Thank you. All right. So we've got some sources if you want to learn more about him. I'm not going to claim which of these styles of music you can find reflected in Lachma Anya, but you're welcome to try to figure it out for yourself. We have here a video that my father made of singing Lachma Anya. We have a harmony version of Lachma Anya. And at the end, for those who wish to stay around and hear it, either my father or I will sing Lachma Anya. All right, let's go on to source texts. Doris, would you read this from Deuteronomy, please?
You shall not eat anything leavened with it for 7 days thereafter. You shall eat unleavened bread, bread of distress, for you departed from the land of Egypt hurriedly, so that you may remember the day of your departure from the land of Egypt as long as you live.
Thank you. In the context?
This is from the biblical book of Deuteronomy, from the Review of Jewish Holidays. This is the origin of the phrase Lechemoni, meaning bread of distress, poverty, affliction. The phrase Lachma Anya is the Aramaic translation.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to our next source text. Evan, would you read this, please?
Okay, I'm on my phone, so forgive me if. All right. The Gemara further relates when Rav Konya would eat bread, he would open the door to his house, saying, "Whoever needs, let him come in and eat." Rava said, "I can fulfill all these customs of Rav Kana, except of this one, which I cannot do." Should I continue?
Yes, please.
Context. This is from the Babylonian Talmud, Masechet Tractate Tainus, about fasting. The Mishnah says that one declares a fast for a number of reasons, including an epidemic of a collapsing building. Comments on this and says that Rabbi Konya would survey the city each cloudy day to see if there were unstable walls that might collapse in the rain and hurt somebody. If he found one, he would urge the owner to rebuild the wall as soon as possible. If the owner didn't have the money, Rabbi Konya would use his own funds to rebuild the wall. The Gemara then goes on to tell about other things that Rabbi Konya did, one of which is our text. The text is of the origins of the phrase Yeres. I'm saying that wrong. How do you pronounce that?
Yeteveyechol.
Okay. What does that mean?
Come and eat.
Okay, and call Dirt Street.
Yep, Kol Yitzrich.
Okay.
All who are in need.
Yeah.
Which are phrases in Lachma Anya.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
So these are the source texts for Lachma Anya and Kol Yitzrich and Yetev V'Yechol. Everything else comes from after the time of the Bible or the Talmud. Cindy, would you read the history of Lachma Anya, please?
This text is written in Aramaic, thus it probably dates to a time when that was the spoken language of the Jewish community. The text does not come from the Babylonian Talmud, so it is not earlier than 500 CE. Wait, it is not earlier?
Right, because the Babylonian Talmud was finished in 500, redacted by 500.
Right.
So since this was not in the discussions of Passover recorded in the Talmud.
Oh, I see. So they didn't have access to it. I see. Thank you.
Yep.
It is first found in the first Seder, which had a Haggadah as an appendix, that of Rav Amran Gaon in 868 CE. It therefore was presumably added sometime in between 500 and 800 CE. According to the Jewish Encyclopedia, Arabic displaced Aramaic with the Muslim conquests, so that starting with 651, Arabic was starting to make inroads with the Jews of Babylonia. Thus, the timing of this text composition is probably 500 to 650 CE. Incidentally, there are those who think it dates to the time of Jesus and that Jesus was pushing back against it by saying, "This matzah is my body," or that the Jews were responding to his statement by composing this. However, this does not explain why this text is neither in the Mishnah nor the Talmud. Thanks for clarifying the date. I get it now. Thank you.
You're welcome. There's more. You're welcome to either read or pass.
Oh, sure. In the 1000s CE, the Machzor Vitri, a commentary on the Seder and Haggadah written by a disciple of Rashi, says that the bread of affliction means the bread of leaving our affliction. Some medieval Haggadot have the verses in a different order and start with an introductory line, "We left Egypt hastily. Bifhilu yatzanu mi Mitzrayim." This is also in Maimonides' version from 1175. We left. Some versions from the Middle Ages have the first word as kaha instead of ha, meaning this is like the kaha instead of this is the. This is probably a reaction to the Christians saying that the host, the wafer used for Mass, was the actual body of Jesus. By the 1300s, Rabbi David Abudar Haram in Spain notes that this text is written in Aramaic, which was the vernacular until the 800s, so that everybody, no matter their level of education, might understand that they were being invited to join the Seder. One question that the text might have been composed to answer is, if we're in exile in Babylonia, why bother celebrating leaving the Egyptian exile? After all, if you're not free in your own homeland, what's the point? The answer seems to be the timing of the Egyptian exile was ordained by God, but we can take steps to hasten the end of this exile by being charitable, based on Bava Batra 10a. Giving charity hastens the redemption. Thus, we celebrate the fact that God saved us once and use this text to remind ourselves that it's up to us and our charity, hospitality, to end this current exile. This is the text as it was by 1175 in Maimonides' Mishnah Torah. It is very similar with only a few changes, such as saying next year in Aramaic instead of Hebrew.
Okay, so here's the text, which is basically the same. And then finally, we have here a picture from the Polychrome Historical Haggadah, which goes through the different layers of the composition of the Haggadah. And here you can see the different layers of Lachma Anya, and here's a key so you can study that. Thank you for that. Okay, questions about anything we've read so far before we get into the actual text of Lachma Anya and discussing it?
Do we have any texts prior to the Talmud?
Do we have any?
Origin texts.
Only the Torah where it uses the phrase lechem oni.
Got it.
Other questions? All right, hearing none, we'll dive in. Barry, would you read our text in English, please?
Bread of oppression.
Yes, please.
This is the bread of oppression. Our fathers are in the land of Egypt. Let all who are hungry come in and eat. Let all who are in need come and join us for the Pesach. Now we are here, but next year in the land of Israel. Now slaves, next year we shall be free.
Thank you.
It's got one line left over. This is okay.
All right, go ahead and read our first question, please.
The fact that many words here end in the Hebrew letter Aleph instead of the Hebrew letter Hey, talk about that, is an indication that this text is in Aramaic, which was the vernacular for centuries among Jews. Rashi makes the point here that it is important to welcome people in a language that they understand. What terminology is used at synagogue that might be off-putting to people who don't already know it, and how can synagogues and their members be more welcoming?
Thank you.
That's all I got.
Okay. So if this text was written in Aramaic with the express goal of being understandable by the people who were saying it and the people who might need to hear it, then how can we take that idea into our synagogues today? What terms might not be understandable by everybody? And how can synagogues and their members be more welcoming?
The only thing I can think of in terms of language would be if either Aramaic or Hebrew were stumbling blocks for people like me. I'm ignorant in both languages. That English would help, except for having learned along the way by attending seders at home and some in synagogue, and some mock seders, that picking up terminology. But I think if we're inviting people in, we'd start off with English if they weren't already Hebrew or scholarly in Aramaic, either way, because English is the home language, I guess, here. So
yeah, and you guys are welcome to respond to this question, either thinking about prayer services in general or the Seder specifically.
David?
Yeah.
Based on Barry's comment, Art Scroll, I think it's Art Scroll, has a Haggadah, which is an interlinear that translates every word. So many people have many Haggadahs available. That might be a good one for people who really want to follow along.
If you're inviting people to the Seder, I'm wondering if bread of oppression or bread of affliction would put them off, whereas if you said bread of freedom, It might invite them in more easily.
Interesting. It may miss out on a point, though, that we were slaves. And somewhere along the line, somebody wiser than I taught me that, in fact, I think it's in the text somewhere along the way, that we should consider ourselves as if we participated in the exodus from Egypt when it happened. That we all left with our forefathers, foremothers. We all left with all of them. And some people think that at Har Sinai as well, that we were all at Har Sinai somewhere or another, depending on who you study with.
Can I say something about that?
Yep.
I think that people can relate to people's affliction sometimes, depending on who they are. It can bring a person closer, because there's a lot of groups of people that are mind color that think that they're Jews. And I think the reason is because as Black people, we feel that we have been afflicted and that we have been called by words and those types of names that people call us. And I think that kind of brings a person close to somebody else that been afflicted, because you can have sympathy and empathy for our people.
Great, thank you. Let's go on to the next question. So the phrase is the bread of affliction. Lachma Anya. This is the bread of affliction. The Aramaic Lachma Anya is the same as the Hebrew Lechem Oni from Deuteronomy 16:3. We saw that text already. The phrase can also mean bread of poverty, which connects to the rest of this text. And bread of questions, a fitting preface to the 4 questions, which comes immediately after this. Why start a celebration of freedom with a reference to bread of not freedom?
Bread either way is sustenance, whether it's a bread of affliction or bread of not freedom, but it's food. It's necessary for survival. So I'm just thinking that no matter what you call it, you can name it what you want it, but it basically is sustenance for survival.
It should also promote appreciation. It should promote questions. It should make us ask. It's a perfect lead-in, really, to the 4 questions, and everything about the evening is supposed to be strange and thought-provoking.
So
and the whole evening is moving from suffering to redemption. So it's got to start with the suffering.
So if someone were invited to a Seder who never knew the story of the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible and sat through the Seder, would he consider that he was hearing a service about slavery, or would he be hearing a service about freedom?
Both, I think.
Well, there isn't too much except for the first couple of paragraphs, as I recall, that really has anything about slavery in there. Once we pass the four questions, it's
Well,
mostly about freedom, isn't it?
The reason why, one reason why I think that way is because it starts with Moses, and our God heard the cries of the people. So that's the reason I say that.
And the text, well, the Haggadah itself doesn't mention Moses very much. I believe that the Midrash section of the Maggid part of the Seder, where the rabbis take biblical verses and extrapolate meaning out of them, I believe one of those verses is about God hearing the cries of the people. So yes, that point is basically spot on.
well, it talks about, it discusses how they're building these treasure cities, and the taskmasters are hard, and they're making the quotas of bricks, and now we're not going to give you the grass, you have to find it yourself. So, and the men are separated from the women, and they're suffering because of that, and the women are separated from their men. So there is mention of all those things, and it's in a torment. You can't go through the whole history in one night, but it certainly makes some references to that.
Yes, I believe one of the other verses is about that the rabbis extrapolate on, is about the Egyptians oppressed us ruthlessly. So even though there is a difference between the verses of the Bible, the story in the Bible versus what makes into the Haggadah, there is some of it. Phil.
Yes, there's so many complications and ironies there. It occurs to me because it's not in the Haggadah, I don't think, but when we sit there, we're aware it says that Moses says, Hashem says to me, to Pharaoh, let my people go that they may come out in the wilderness and serve me, be my slaves, my servants. And you kind of lose that in the translation, if it's worship or whatever. But there was always that question of what is our freedom, and is it the freedom of service in the wilderness? So that there's always an underlying, I think, I don't know if it's an irony, but there's a wrinkle there.
Yeah, it's like freedom from versus freedom to.
Something like that.
Yeah. Let's go into the next question. So the next phrase is that our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. Some translations say forefathers. The word could go either way, but ancestors recognize that women and children have been involved in Passover since the very beginning. Talking about our ancestors eating this in Egypt establishes a commonality between hosts and guests so that guests feel at ease. Well, converts share spiritual ancestors with those who are born Jewish. How can this commonality be implemented at a Seder where not everybody is Jewish?
Isn't there a rule that often honored in the transgression that you're not supposed to have Gentiles at the Seder? It seems to me that is a rule that is old, but that is many of us certainly don't adhere to. Am I totally wrong about that?
I will do research into this. This sounds vaguely familiar, and see what I can come up with.
I heard the same thing, Phil.
It's interesting because the idea of let all who are hungry come and eat as it says in our text, does not say let all who are Jewish come and hungry, or let all those who are in need. Does not say let all those who are Jewish and in need.
It's interesting. I think a lot of liberal Jewish families feel they should include non-Jewish community members and friends to help them build understanding. It's certainly the way I was always raised.
Yeah, I wasn't recommending this, but I do know that it's a view that is old.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating, Phil. I appreciate it very much. I was just contrasting the midrash, if you will, from what I understand to be the liberal perspective.
Right.
But if you're just comparing what Phil brought out and what Cindy brought out, I'm guessing that the origins of what Phil brought out of not inviting comes from a time and a place where we weren't really welcome in the outside world. We didn't have a lot of people who weren't Jewish that we would have invited. And we did things to, while holding a Seder with Jews, we did things to not be threatening. So, for example, in the Spanish world, they used to, well, the whole idea of opening your door for Elijah. My understanding, and I was just reviewing my Haggadah earlier, is the door used to be open through most of the service, but because of increased persecution and fear, the door was just open for a brief time. And in Spain, they used to hold their Seders out where people could see them, but they would serve white wine instead of red, so we wouldn't be confused for blood. So I think there, but in our world, we don't carry those same, well, we haven't carried those same fears, and have been, we probably have a lot more of us have a lot of friends that we'd be interested in inviting than maybe our grandparents would have in Europe, for example.
Bill mentioned, if I heard correctly, that Jews would not invite Christians to a Seder. What about other religions? Is it only Christians they would omit, or was it any religion?
I'll look into this. I think it may depend on context. So who are you afraid of? And is it about building an experience within the community, or is it just about keeping those who might be a threat out of the experience? I know that the experiences in Eastern Europe and in the Middle East amongst Ashkenazi versus Sephardic Jews were very different and led to some different Jewish laws being promulgated because of the different contexts that they were in. So,
I was going to say, if you consider when the Inquisition was officially terminated by the church, you might find that it wasn't that relatively long ago. I can't remember the exact dates, and so folks were very reluctant to even to broadcast it, to have it be known to the public. And whether there was still that amount of persecution, there was always that prejudice. And yeah, we in the public, we find that today as well. So many people, you never know who's who.
Yes. All right. Recognizing the time, I'm going to quickly show you all what is left in the source sheet. And then we will end for the evening. And those who want to stay on and hear the text being chanted can do so. So there are a variety of questions posed for each of the phrase of question for each phrase in Lachma Anya. Then we have some readings and translations. This is the Matzah of Hope reading from the time when the Soviet Jews were not able to leave. And here's an illustration making that connection. Translation, one Spanish translation, another Spanish translation, a French translation. There's a book, For Such a Time as This, by Rabbi Elliot Cosgrove that connects to this time. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, something about hospitality, Elie Wiesel's remembrance. Some say that let all who are hungry come and eat versus let all who are in need come and celebrate with us. That it's physical hunger versus spiritual or emotional hunger, being lonely, for instance. So here's a story about that. Here's an AJWS text about it. Something about the Ethiopian Seders. And then Appendix B, if you like Aramaic, here is a video of Isaac Mayer, who translated the song All Star by Smash Mouth into Talmudic Aramaic. So something a little bit different. Going to stop the recording.